and whatnot.
Format. We've been working towards this for a while. Hopefully it is fixed and we are able to be in a podcast form. That's the ultimate goal. All right. So anybody want to briefly describe today's topic with a little bit of excitement?
We are talking about Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, he said a little bit of excitement.
I know what? I felt a little bit of excitement. Just a little bit.
That's my super excited voice, just so you guys know.
Gotcha. We are talking about Blade Runner, original and new. We were originally going to do this last week and start off October with a horror month, but with taking a break, we're approaching it this week. So Blade Runner 2049 is actually coming out today. Pretty awesome. I can't wait to see it. Have either of you guys seen it yet?
Nope.
Not yet. I'm going to see it tomorrow, probably.
Do you guys have plans to see it?
I have plans with some friends, but...
Josh, I might go with you.
Hopefully. I am really excited.
No, I am so just stupid excited about this film.
The only thing that has me a little bit less than thrilled is that it's 2 hours and 45 minutes from what I've heard.
Whoa.
And so you've got to really be awake for this.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I can't wait, though. I'm ready to strap in. I want to see it on the biggest screen possible. You know, go to the Warren. What are you thinking?
Yeah.
What are you thinking, Eric?
I kind of want to do Director's Suite.
Oh, that's a good
I
choice,
read
too.
some reviews, and I was like, all right, this is worth it.
Honestly, we'll go into this a little bit later, I'm sure, but if anything, I'm sure Blade Runner has done well with a bit of the Hollywood treatment, maybe making the new one a bit more exciting than the original, but anyway.
Are you dare insinuating that the original was hard to watch?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
It had its moments, but yeah, no, you're right. It's kind of dry.
Well, no, it's what I will say this, and I say this of a lot of movies, that it was an amazing movie, but it's not a good movie to watch if you're tired.
That's a good. I mean, honestly, I think that's a good way to put it. Eric, you had an objection. What are you thinking, man?
I don't know. It's just one of my favorite movies. That's all, you know.
That's all. I'm just leaving
that's
it.
all.
I'm just leaving it.
That's all. You're just killing my baby in front of me.
Yeah. Hurting me physically.
All right, before we dive in to the new Blade Runner and the old Blade Runner, and frankly, Legacy for that matter, let's do some weekly news. This is going to cover 2 weeks. As I said, we took a week off, so I'll go ahead and start us out. I kind of picked through the weeds of movie news. There's not a whole lot going on, but I think I found some couple of things. So for the first thing I jotted down, Bruce Willis... is officially back for the Die Hard series in Die Hard Part 6. Guys, why do they keep making these? It's going to be a year one. So not only a Die Hard 6, it's going to be an origin story.
I was just talking to my friends about this the other day and telling them how there's a lot of films that feel like the character is this epic, almost godlike person who needs to have more stories told of him.
It's unstoppable.
Yeah.
But Bruce Willis was not that character in Die Hard 1.
Not at all. Well, I mean, it's the classic thing of what? In the first movie, his feet are cut and he can barely walk. And in the fourth movie, he's blowing up a helicopter with a car.
He was supposed to be like a vulnerable guy, you know, just this average Joe cop.
Right. And he's this indestructible killing machine.
Yes.
I cannot blame Bruce Willis for coming back for more. I am sure they are a blast to film.
And you know, so he has a lot of, I won't go into kind of Hollywood rumors, but apparently, and long story short, he's hard to work with. So,
Really?
But apparently, yeah, he's hard to work with, but apparently the money's right, he'll be there. So they're having Bruce Willis as an older version of John McClane, and they haven't cast him yet, but a younger version of John McClane in year one.
Really quick, what was the last one that came out?
I believe it was it A Good Day to Die Hard?
Yeah, the one where they tried to set up a young version of Bruce Willis.
Oh,
with
through his
sequels.
son, right? It was Jai Courtney, the guy who played Boomerang in Suicide Squad.
And it went
Oh my gosh.
about as well as the attempt to make Shia LaBeouf the new Indiana Jones.
Which they are excluding from the next one, by the way.
They have just backtracked on that attempted tradition.
The attempted tradition, yeah.
Did they ever succeed on that with any movies?
I
can't think of any.
I can't think it off the top of my
where
head. I'm sure there's
the son
one.
took the reins and got a good sequel.
I get the Eric. Can you think of any?
No.
Yeah, I can't either. I'm sure there are some out there, but I can't think of it at the moment. So, long story short, Die Hard 6, the movie we all need. See you guys in the theaters. All right, what do we got next on the list?
Well, I guess Will Smith is officially not returning to Men in Black.
Ooh.
Yeah, I guess there's a sequel and it's going to be crossed with 21 Jump Street. And
Wait,
Willing.
what?
Yeah.
Like style-wise, or is this a crossover?
Oh no, it's a straight cross.
What?
It was in a Sony leaked email that they are planning a crossover of 21 Jump Street and Men in Black for the further
It
franchise.
will have Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum. So, what? Who said this was a good idea?
You know, it honestly might be a beautiful disaster.
It
I'm
might.
waiting. I'm not gonna lie. I'll probably go see it. I love 21 Jump Street and 22. I think they're hilarious.
I thought they were hilarious too, but I thought 22 Jump Street killed all the future sequels of it.
Yeah, I guess. Where do you go from here? What about space?
Yeah, I guess so.
So Will Smith, I understandably is probably not coming back for reasons I would imagine maybe a turn in the series, but yeah, he's not coming back. Do you guys have anything else you want to comment on that?
They got to have that star power. Will Smith's gone, so they got to have Jonah Hill.
I mean, I haven't seen Will Smith in anything super blockbustery in a while.
No,
Suicide
it's-
Squad, right? That's the last
Oh,
thing.
you're right.
Suicide
Yeah.
Squad. He was
I
in
try to forget about that.
Yeah, me too.
He was in that film. What is that film called? That was about the concussions in the NFL that they tried to really push for an Oscar nom. It was
Was it just called Concussion?
I think it was called Concussion. Yeah,
Yeah.
tell the truth, like that one. Yeah, it was just yeah. They really, I don't know if you guys remember this, but they really pushed for a Oscar nomination and it didn't go anywhere. And then there's a whole drama. I won't get into it. That went with that. Yeah. Long story short, you're right. Will Smith's not really been in a whole lot.
Woo.
Oh, I will say though, before we leave this topic, he is cast officially as Genie in the live-action Aladdin film, Guy Ritchie's Aladdin film. So that's kind of interesting.
What
But
are with these weird casts?
I don't know,
These
man.
are so strange.
Like, I don't know. And even if he's awesome, it's going to be hard to measure up to Robin Williams. So that's just my
Yeah.
thought, at least. But all right, Josh, what do we got next on the list?
Okay, well, next up, we have Hollywood's darling James Cameron coming back with a sequel to his Avatar film. It'll be starting to film with a $1 billion budget, and it already has 4 sequels scheduled. So
Is that a
gosh.
billion with a B?
that's a billion with a B.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, the first one made that much, right? So, like,
right. That was also back when 3D was relevant. You know,
yeah.
that's crazy.
Do they need this?
Huh?
Do they need this many movies? Avatar?
He said he's gone on record saying he wants to finish his career with Avatar.
Well,
What other
with
stories
5
do you?
films of it, yeah.
Yeah, what other stories do you have to tell? The first one was Pocahontas. Like, it literally was Pocahontas. Have you guys ever seen that before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like,
Dances with Wolves, Pocahontas.
Yeah.
I mean, how
exactly.
many more ways can you say we're screwing up our environment?
aliens. We need
With
blue
blue
aliens.
people. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, anyway, something that might make it worth existing is the fact that Kate Winslet has joined the cast
Kate
of
Winslet.
it.
Gotcha.
Winslet, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. No, and I mean, she's an Oscar winner. I think she won it for The Reader. I think I could be completely wrong, but hopefully she'll bring something to the table. Why? All right, and let's see. Next on the list is gonna be last for our news. Bride of Frankenstein was pulled from Universal's schedule for the following 2 years for poor reasons stating the poor box office performance from The Mummy starring Tom Cruise. Did you guys even see this movie?
No.
No, but I know they were really, really trying hard in that movie to set up this cinematic universe of monster creatures,
Yeah.
like old school monster creatures, and they pushed too hard, and people were just like, "We really don't want that." You
Yeah,
know?
it's the so-called dark universe, and they still have it slated. They're still making movies for it.
Does
But-
it have anything to do with the Brendan Fraser Mummy movies?
This Mummy movie?
Yeah.
I've been told no.
Oh, okay.
I've been
Not
told it's a
really at all.
straight
That's what I
reboot.
assumed.
Yeah, no, I've been told it's a straight reboot.
Interesting.
But The Bride of Frankenstein, it was supposed to star Javier Bardem as Frankenstein's monster and rumored Angelina Jolie as the Bride of Frankenstein. But they pulled it, so I think they're pulling the plug. They realized, I don't even have the numbers in front of me, but I know The Mummy did not perform at the box
No.
office. So,
Well, there's a good decision.
Well,
yeah, hopefully they take a lesson from it, but they still have the Dark Universe planned. I do know they set up, Russell Crowe. Wow, I blanked on his name. Russell Crowe is going to be Dr. Jekyll. like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And
Really?
also they're setting up. They still have Johnny Depp. This is confirmed. They still have Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man. So it's like, they're kind of pulling out the old fogies
Yeah.
for these roles. So we'll see about that. But as for now, the Dark Universe continues on without Bride of Frankenstein. All right. So today, very special day, October 6th. I didn't say that in the beginning, 2017. Blade Runner 2049 is officially in theaters. Guys, I've been waiting, I feel like months, if years, for this. How excited are you?
Very excited. I love Denis Villeneuve.
He's
so
incredible.
awesome.
He's incredible, and when his name was attached to it, my jaw
Yeah.
almost hit the floor.
Yeah.
Did you guys see Arrival?
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's incredible.
So good.
It was so good.
Hearing that the guy behind Arrival was behind this movie
Yeah.
made me not worried at all.
Yeah. What I like even more was Sicario.
Oh yeah,
I
Sicario.
have yet
was-
to see it.
Really introduced me to him and just got me really hyped on this director.
Sure, and for those who don't know, if you should check it out, Sicario. That's starring Emily Blunt, and that is an. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a tale about is she a DEA agent that gets sent down into the mafia cartel,
I believe she's
or
a DE.
to pursue it, and they have a Sicario, which is I believe Spanish for hitman, that they played by Benicio del Toro. That's down with them, and Josh Brolin's in it as well.
Best Benicio del Toro performance ever. I'm serious.
Oh, by far. I mean,
Yeah.
he's menacing, he's intimidating, but he's also quiet throughout the whole entire film.
That's awesome.
And also has one of the best 8-minute suspense sequence filmings of all time, whereas the shooting on the highway.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, if you guys don't know what we're talking about, you can find video essays. I've come across multiple video essays about this scene, about how you film suspense. So you should check it out. But yeah, Blade Runner 2049, starring, just a little bit of info, starring Ryan Gosling, for those unaware, as the letter K. That's all we have of a name for him. It's just K. It's not Agent K like Men in Black. It's K. So we got Ryan Gosling, Ana de Armas as Joy. I'm just calling it right now. I think I don't want to ruin it for myself, but I think she is a replicant. I think she's an android. If you guys are familiar with the Blade Runner story, we'll talk about that more in a second. And also a reprisal of Harrison Ford as Deckard.
Yeah.
Josh, anything you wanted to add as far as your excitement or your thoughts for this new movie before we dive into it?
Well, I am very excited, and really the only thing that made me nervous about it is I don't necessarily like old Harrison Ford as much as some other people may like him.
Yeah.
It might just be because of his reprisal of Indiana Jones that really ruined him for me in the recent years, but he always just seems really grumpy about filming now.
Oh, sure. Well, and he's gone on record in interviews, and I actually wrote this in our notes, but he said the only role that he actually wished to reprise was Deckard. He didn't like Han Solo. He didn't like all these other roles that made him famous, but he wanted to do Deckard again.
Yeah, seeing him as Han Solo again really made me concerned about this cast because I don't know. I just can't handle the old man.
The old
Can't
man
handle it.
grumpy.
Like watching him run just makes me sad.
Just makes you sad. All right, well, moving on. We got a synopsis for those unaware for the movie Blade Runner 2049. A young Blade Runner's discovery of a long-buried secret leads him to track down a former Blade Runner, Rick Deckard, who's been missing for 30 years. That's taken from IMDb. All right, before we actually get into it, I did want to give some background for those unaware, because none of us were alive when this first movie came out. 1982, Blade Runner, based off a book, Philip K. Dick. Blade Runner, what is it? It's a little bit of background. It's based off a novel called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Like I said, written by Philip K. Dick, published in 1968. Needless to say, kind of well before its time. We kind of briefly talked about this for the show, and I'm sure Eric will get into it more later. But Eric, Cyberpunk, I mean, this was near the birth of it. What do you briefly? How do you think it contributed to it? We'll talk more about it later.
Well, I think it really set the visual aesthetics for Cyberpunk. That neon, the neon lights in a really gritty, old multicultural metropolis, and that it has that noir aspect to it that they think that Blade Runner set in stone for other cyberpunk films.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, multiple people have gone on record saying it is the first quote-unquote modern sci-fi film, a combination of film noir and the old, sci-fi of the 50s. So it's incredibly influential. Just kind of looking through our notes. Just a little bit more some background. The original Blade Runner, directed by Ridley Scott, released on June 25th, 1982, starring Harrison Ford as Deckard, Rutger Hauer as Roy Batty, the replicant, and also Sean Young as Rachel, the replicant as well. Sorry, minor spoilers. Synopsis of the old film: a Blade Runner, this was the original, a Blade Runner must pursue and try to terminate 4 replicants, aka androids, who stole a ship in space and have returned to Earth to find their creator. Taken also from IMDb. Initially, before we move into the story, this film was considered a flop. I don't know if you guys know this.
Oh yeah, no, it did not do well in the box offices.
It was up against like E.T. and stuff, right?
Yeah, it was actually. Let me pull it up. I have a list right here. Within the weeks that it came out, it was alongside E.T. the Extraterrestrial, John Carpenter's The Thing, so not the original one, but the remake, Tron, and Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, all in theaters at once.
Yeah.
Sci-fi paradise, guys.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
No wonder it flopped. I mean, those are big movies.
Right. I mean, even Star Trek II is considered, the best of the old series by many. I'm sure there are some angry fists shaking right now. But I mean, yeah, why it was considered a flop? Its budget was $28 million, and it only grossed $33.8 million. I mean, not even $10 million, not even quite over $5 million. What its budget was. This movie, it really was underwhelming. And a lot of people attribute it to different endings. There was a theatrical cut, there was a final cut, there was like 5 different cuts I was reading about as I was researching this. You could also attribute it to the weekend, but Josh and I actually, when we were writing up the show, kind of decided to examine the theatrical cut versus the final cut and see, because nowadays it's considered a classic for its updated director's final cut.
Can you clarify what the main difference of the two is?
Yeah, sure. So the main difference of the theatrical cut in 1982 was, quote unquote, this is how you'd find it, the happy ending. So what happened is the film, instead of leaving kind of on an open-ended note, it actually had a Hollywood happy ending to it, for as dark as this movie can get. What happened was, and I'll read what I wrote down here. Rachel and Deckard escape to the Los Angeles area. They make it out together. They ride off into the sunset. They run off as lovers together into the happy wilderness. And there's a line from Gaff, who is played by Edward James Olmos, who says, "It's too bad she won't live, but then again, who does?" And it kind of sends him off. So it's this happy ending of, Deckard made it out with his love.
Yeah, well, the catch to that is that replicants only live a couple years.
Right, and in the film, though, she doesn't have, right? She's the one that doesn't have a lifetime.
Yeah, she is... Well, no, I'm pretty sure she's confirmed in at least the cut I watched, to still have that.
Yeah, she's not
limited
done.
lifetime. Like a lot of spoilers we're talking about here.
Yeah, sorry.
But the difference with her that you're thinking of is that she was like this advanced model that had more of a personality than previous models.
Sure, and that was kind of what the whole Deckard testing her scene was supposed
More
to be about.
human than human.
More human than human, exactly. And
Which is a very interesting topic about the film. There's a lot of great ideas and stuff that the film really starts to explore.
Well, and real quick, I do want to ask, while we're on the subject of endings, Josh, what did you see different in the final cut?
Well, the final cut, the largest difference I noticed, it's been a while since I saw the theatrical cut, but was that it felt a lot quicker. Like, it actually felt like the director had gone through and cut things a little bit tighter in places, and the voiceover narration was gone at the ending. The biggest difference in the end is that the end of the final cut is a lot more open-ended. You're not really sure what happens, but the theatrical cut, they had Harrison Ford. I don't know if you remember hearing about this, about his extremely excited monologue at the end. Basically, they had him come back and record some voiceover narration to clarify the theatrical cut's ending, if I'm correct.
Right. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong too, but I think there were a lot of people say that he purposely did them terribly.
Oh yeah,
Really?
He did not want them to use them.
So,
but
I mean, I've seen a cut where the voiceover goes the whole movie. Is that what you're talking about?
I believe, from what I've read, I could be getting them backwards, but in the theatrical cut, they added 13 voiceovers that they did not have in the final cut.
Okay, okay. I've seen both. Yeah.
Yeah, so and they're from what I've experienced, and then I can't remember off the top of my head, but I remember them being kind of rough.
Yeah, they're a little rough, but honestly, like, I took it as a kind of a just seemed dated a little bit, so I kind of accepted it more. I don't know.
Sure,
Yeah,
he kind of took it as his
for its
performance.
age, I guess.
Voiceover is a very classic trope of film noir movies.
Yeah, that's why I like it.
And so it did fit in. As far as purists of the director's vision might go, maybe you don't like the voiceover, but I don't think they really ruined the movie with the voiceover
I don't think
or
so either.
anything.
Yeah, and I mean, you're completely right. For those, I mean, unaware, like film noir, think of like the 1940s detective stories. You know, he's on the phone telling his whole story of where it all went wrong. You know,
Yeah.
it's very much reliant on his experience and him telling it. So, I mean, you're completely right. Another idea, I didn't mean to cut you off earlier, but more human than human. Josh, what were you meaning by that?
Okay, well, one of the things that Blade Runner, one of the themes it focuses on is this idea of simulacra and hyperrealities, both of which are topics that are usually focused on, in movies at least, studied in relation to TV screens and the media. But the basic idea of the hyperreality is when the representation of something, such as news bulletins about something or some visual image that society sees on a TV screen about a person or an event, the TV screen's version of it becomes more real than the actual event.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the themes that Blade Runner explores a lot, but with humans themselves. What happens when humanity is replicated by technology to the point where it's indistinguishable which is the original and which is the replication.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was thinking about when coming up with my list we're about to talk about, is like cyberpunk always focuses on this like sense of human identity, and when that gets mixed in with technology, like how do we identify ourselves as beings if you are, you know, if your brain is like integrated with a computer, that kind of thing, or like if you're like a computer and if you're a living, breathing thing, then like how do you consider that as an identity? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. What constitutes the idea of a reality?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, you're completely right. This whole film is based around the idea of existence. You know?
Yeah.
You know, I won't ruin it because it is very much the end of the film. But I mean, even the existence of the main characters.
Yeah.
You know who they are.
We've pretty much already ruined everything. But
Yeah. Well, and you know what? It was still somewhat up in the air, and I will say my
is.
one critique is that I feel like the new trailers kind of answered the question, at least a little bit in my mind, but I don't know. I could be.
I don't know.
reading
Maybe
into it
we'll
too
be
much.
surprised.
we might be surprised. They've got to have picked an answer, though.
Yeah,
they can't
yeah.
just keep it open-ended.
I think people would be mad if they did that.
Yeah, I think so too. They throw stuff at. Well, and honestly, based on the reviews, though, I think it's like at an 82 on Metacritic right now.
Oh, yeah,
it's like it's getting insane reviews.
People are liking it. People
Which,
are liking it.
to no surprise, though, I mean, you're right. We're talking about the director's former works of Arrival and Sicario. I mean, the dude hasn't made a quote-unquote bad movie by critics yet. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, so cool. So the idea of identity, from what we can tell, carries into the new one as well. Looks like, I'm guessing the brunette female, the non-Joy character, the non-love interest character, looks like, I'm guessing, is a replicant. I'm guessing she's the one that busts through the wall in the preview. But I could be wrong. You're right. It's very much, and even in the trailer, I mean, the shot of Ryan Gosling standing over a book, and it's like your story is not yet finished. Again, the idea of identity. So, yeah, you guys are completely right. Anything else you guys wanted to add on that? Well, if you have nothing to add right now,
Well, when we get into a later section, I'll talk about it a bit more.
Sure. Okay, so kind of moving on, we got some. I did want to add for the new one as well. We talked about it briefly before, but the idea of cyberpunk and kind of being Blade Runner wasn't the birth, but it was definitely one of the father figures in the cyberpunk movement. And just to kind of give a background on what we mean by the cyberpunk, and specifically cyberpunk attributes examine drug culture, technology, sexual revolutions while avoiding the utopian society of prior science fiction works, which is really interesting. I never thought about it that way, but it completely makes sense, though.
It avoids utopia and largely avoids dystopia as well. It doesn't. really say that all of these things that all the technologies, all the replicants and whatnot are ruining society as it stands. Like, it does say they have problems, but the society seems to be going along just fine despite whatever Deckard's doing, you know? Like, it is, at least for the people on Earth, it's not exactly the best civilization, but for humanity in general, it is definitely not a dystopia in my mind, at least.
I would actually have to disagree to some extent. Like, when you have these shots of, like, you know, these corporate advertisements of, like, all these different things, and it just seems like, you know, like the elite own everything. I don't know. I see a lot of cyberpunk where I see dystopian aspects, but
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with both of you. I think it's definitely darker, but I don't think it's quite dystopian. But at the same time, I mean, I think you're right. I think there is kind of an overwhelming sense of the individual humanity is suffocated amongst consumerism and, you know, somewhat, I would say that in my mind there's kind of a tie in it. It's a lack of government, but also oppressive in some ways, I feel like, because you see representation of cops very strewn out in the first Blade Runner, but when you do see them, I mean, they're killing. I mean, you know, they're the Blade Runners. They're not necessarily cops, but I mean, they're the authority figure, and they're killing. You know, there's no detaining. There's no. So I think it kind of rides a middle line between it.
yeah, and I think that it's like, I think the like bureaucratic systems tend to, like, ignore the fact that these replicants feel. You know, these replicants have, like, like actual emotions, and so I don't know. It seems kind of dark to me in that sense.
I mean, it's definitely not a bright movie.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just don't see it like it's a different. If it is dystopian, it's a different class of dystopian than, let's say, Divergent or Hunger Games dystopian. You know, it's a dystopian where society is not bound to collapse soon. You know?
And you know what? Even then, when you say Hunger Games and Divergent, for some reason I realize they are on the scale. They are an oppressive government, but I never once saw those movies and felt the same kind of, like, almost nihilism as I did when watching Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the Blade Runner does an amazing job of framing its main characters among the huge, enormous, overwhelming cityscape. It is one of the first real sci-fi movies to do that and focus on how small humanity has become in relation to its achievements. And that's definitely an important theme of it in the film. I think even going to the ending of the film, knowing that Deckard kind of might make it out, especially in the theatrical cut, he makes it out with his love interest, and the cops really are just like, whatever, he's just another guy, you know, like, they kind of move on.
Sure, yeah. They just say, you know, all right, you know, you kids stay safe. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're completely right. I think it's very, I don't know, I think it's very much a grandfather figure, as weird as that kind of sounds, in the sense of an oppressive government. When you were talking about that, it kind of, you know, you said it was a society very much bound. I just kept envisioning the Tyrell Corp, like, building and how it looks like a pyramid. I mean, you know, the symbolism behind that can be talked about, you know, an entire course. It's like, you know, it's you know, it's this godlike idea of this Tyrell, who's the creator, for those who don't know, of the androids or the replicants. You know, he is this godlike figure, and he, you know, gives life, and, you know, all the implications of that. And I'll actually talk about that with our top picks. We actually picked some top picks of 3 films each, or 3 various medias that are influenced by Blade Runner a little bit later on. But I just kept coming to mind that sense of the pyramid, and he is so far above everybody else. I don't think you see a street. Like, it's like the building's so big, and
until the theatrical cut's ending, we do see a street.
Well, I'm sorry, like in the in the same shot.
Oh,
in the same shot, you just see the pyramid, and that's it. Like, it just doesn't. It seems like a void, where the city is below. Before we move on to some new topics with the new movie, some points. Anything else you guys wanted to add on that subject?
No.
Well, so the ending shot of theatrical cut, remind me, is shot of like this road in these mountains and a car driving along it with Deckard and his love interest in, correct?
Yes, and actually, just a fun fact, you made me think of this. That is actually taken from Stanley Kubrick. I don't know if you know, you guys know. Were you about to say that? I'm so sorry. Here, you take the reins. Take the reins. Take the reins.
No, what my co-host was reminded of when I was clarifying that there is that when they were adding the ending in addition to having to bring actors back for voiceover, they had to get footage for the ending, and they didn't have enough money to go out and take a helicopter and film those scenes, and so they just kind of borrowed from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. I mean, they owned the footage, they just kind of reused it. I believe they flipped it or something.
I can't exactly remember what they did, but yeah.
It's pretty obvious if you'd watch them back to back, but
yeah,
did some touch-ups, and that's what they used.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, I don't even know. I think Stanley Kubrick just gave it to him. I think he just gave it to Ridley Scott and said, "Hey, like, here you go, here you go, bud." So,
how does that make you feel about it?
You know, I think it reinforces the idea that, to no surprise, they did a final cut and a director's cut. Yeah. I think it was very much apparent. I mean, Ridley Scott was I think that was his third film. I could be wrong. I think it was The Duelists, Alien, and then Blade Runner. I think that was his third film. He was a young director. You know, he has the studio bearing down his neck. It doesn't surprise me. You know, it's you know, they said no, that won't fly. You know, because at this point, sci-fi, it was Star Wars. You know, I mean, it had to have a happy ending. You know, it wasn't. I mean, I guess they had at that time, had they had Empire Strikes Back yet? I think it was Star Wars 1 was 76, and then I want to say 80 was Empire Strikes Back. So maybe they had that unhappy ending, you know, of Han being taken. But still, you know, which is kind of weird. That's Harrison Ford.
Well, there's a very different thing for what audiences want and expect, and critics want and expect.
Preach it.
Audiences in general, in mass, want to go to the theater to escape depressing reality and have a good time, you know? Like, people who go back and watch these movies afterwards are often going because they know they have these artistic meanings, which is good and great, and movies should have them, but it's no surprise that studios try to move it towards a more audience-friendly approach.
Right. I mean, you know, in their minds, I think they just see dollar signs. You know, they want to see and to quote our courses, I'm so sorry for being that guy, but it's a classical Hollywood ending. You know, the happy ending. We've had this idea driven into our minds time and time again through our film and media courses. But, you know, but I mean, that's a very real thing. You know, the happy ending, and unfortunately, it kind of took away from the original idea.
Have you guys? Do you guys know anything about the production, like the actual shooting of the film?
The original or the new one?
The original.
Not too much. I actually did have to write I hate involving school in our show, but I had to write a paper over it. So briefly, I know they very much focused when he was designing the worlds. Before he focused on the script, he was focusing on the look of the world. But other than that, not too much. What did you have in mind?
Apparently, it was a horrible shoot. Like, everybody was miserable. And just it kind of like I always wonder when I watch Blade Runner if that like kind of misery added to like the dark tone of the acting in the film.
I love that point. I never thought about that.
Yeah,
you can probably see it in Harrison Ford's acting in the movie. Especially, I think that might be
just resting face.
That might be one of the reasons why grumpy old Harrison Ford was so willing to come back to Deckard, because he just doesn't have to act as much for it.
It was apparently, you know, it was in New York, so it was cold and it was rainy, and they had to wait around a lot for the rain to stop and such. But,
and it just, I mean, I think it totally added to the bleakness of their existence, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think there was truly, even the relieving, quote-unquote, happy moments, I feel like were never truly, you know, ecstatically happy. So, I love that point. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Cool. So just for time's sake, I'll kind of move on. I did want to touch some points on your guys' thoughts of the new Blade Runner. None of us have seen it yet, as a reminder. What do you guys think? We already talked briefly about the director. I'm terrible at pronouncing his name. He is French. Eric, will you help me out here?
Denis Villeneuve.
Thank you so much. He, for those of you who have seen him, he did Prisoners back in, I want to say 2012 with Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal, Sicario, and also Arrival. He was Oscar nominated for Arrival for Best Picture, and I want to say Best Director too. But this man, I mean, he's incredible. I'm so excited. Like I said, we talked about it earlier, so we won't talk about it too much now. But he is slated. I don't know if you guys know this, to helm a Dune. Dune, sorry, not Doom. A Dune, Dune, reboot with actually. David Lynch did one back in the 80s, and it's considered a terrible movie, and they kind of swept it under the rug. But yeah, but if anyone can do it now, I mean, what do you guys think? Can he do it?
I mean, I think he is the right guy for sci-fi. Seriously, after seeing Arrival, I was like, okay, this is great. And then when I saw that he was slated for Blade Runner, I was like, this is absolutely perfect. Just like with his style, it fits sci-fi pretty well.
I just hope he wants to do sci-fi for the rest of his career.
Yeah. I don't think he will, though.
Can we just give a major shout out to Roger Deakins being the cinematographer for this film? If you guys aren't familiar with him, Oscar nominated 13 times.
Yeah.
The dude is a madman. He's worked on, honestly, a movie, if you love it, he's probably worked on it. He's worked on Shawshank Redemption, No Country for Old Men, Skyfall, the list goes on. The guy is a master at his craft, works a lot with the Coen brothers. Roger Deakins just knows how to frame a shot, dude.
Yeah. Did he do There Will Be Blood?
I actually don't know, to be honest. He might have. We could research that.
So.
I tried to keep my list short when I was referencing, but no, Roger Deakins, he's an elderly gentleman, but he is a beautiful, beautiful piece of work when it comes to filming and framing. So,
while we're on the topic of other crew, like major crew besides for the director with these movies, I thought it best to mention that one of the things a lot of people were worried about with Blade Runner 2049 is the music, actually. The music from the original was composed by Vangelis, and it is a beloved soundtrack. And one of the reasons people like it for the movie so much is the way it was composed, actually. I was reading about this. Vangelis composed it by watching through the scenes as they left the editing room, and then just playing the emotions he felt after watching the scene.
Wow. That's awesome.
So the music itself doesn't just echo the story that's it's telling, but has its own feeling and emotions to it that really are built in with the wonderful sound design in the movie as well. And a lot of people were afraid that they would just take the themes that were used in the original and repeat them over and over again in the new one. And I don't know if that's what they did, but a lot of people were hoping that they would be able to somehow mesh that same kind of semi-improvisational emotion into the new soundtrack.
Right, and Hans Zimmer scoring this one. You might be familiar with his name. He's everywhere like Roger Deakins.
Dynamite, dude.
I mean, if anyone can do it, I'm sure he can.
Yeah.
Based off the preview, the trailer music, I always would turn it up as loud as I could because that Roger Deakins cinematography and that Hans Zimmer score, I just would, I would nerd out. So I'm so excited.
Going back to There Will Be Blood, yes, he did do it.
He did do it. Okay. I mean, it makes sense. The guy knows how to capture a landscape, and you can see that in Sicario.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Jeez.
He knows how to frame a shot. So for time's sake, we did want to move on to, like I said, we have three forms of media that we felt were our favorites when it came to being influenced by Blade Runner. Anyone want to start us off? Any volunteers?
Well, I can start us off. One that's less influenced visually, more thematically, David Cronenberg's Videodrome.
Hey.
I actually have not seen that.
It's
yet.
a bizarre movie if you watch it.
It's in it's next in my media class.
But it focuses a lot on the same themes of what is it really to be a real human versus the representation of a human. And Videodrome takes that very literally with its TV metaphors and imagery. But it's the same kind of thing that Blade Runner was trying to explore with its replicants. And I have no doubt that they're based on similar source material.
Gotcha. That's David Cronenberg. For those unaware, he's a Canadian director. He did The Fly. He did Scanners. He's done a whole bunch of Canadian horror films. interesting. If you guys haven't seen his films, very interesting visuals.
For a lot of the century, he has defined Canadian films in general because they don't really come over to America all that often, and Cronenberg was one of the examples that was really able to push through from Canada rather than the other way around.
Gotcha.
But anyway.
All right, excellent choice. What do you got, Eric?
Well, I was going to do Akira. Have you guys seen Akira?
I have seen,
not.
going back to my show the other day when we talked about anime, I've seen like the first 20 minutes of it. So.
Well, I'm a huge weeaboo, so I chose Akira. It was made in 1988 by Katsuhiro Otomo. And basically it's about a young kid in a motorcycle gang who feels inadequate. And then all of a sudden a freak accident happens and certain technologies enhance him and he gains telekinesis. And so it's like it's about the effect of technology on people who feel inadequate, and it's that power, like he takes that power and he becomes this monster. And so I just think it's a really interesting take on cyberpunk because the mixture of technology with this human really just causes a huge catastrophe. And I just thought it was interesting.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I love that. From what I've seen, I'm definitely familiar with what you're saying. And I mean, I actually talk about that in one of my points too, like the mixture of science and I said kind of magic, but you're right, kind of this human element, going science beyond like, the chemistry labs and whatnot. It's like you have abilities thanks to science. So for my pick, I picked Looper from Rian Johnson, the writer-director of the next Star Wars film. Joseph Gordon-Levitt film, excellent movie, 2012, a couple years ago. But I picked it for a couple of reasons. I'll go through them kind of quickly. But it's, again, kind of like Blade Runner, a dark, somewhat dystopian future. There's law, but you never really see it. And if there is law, it's always violent. There's not a whole lot of presence of authority. It's all the underbelly, of this society and focusing on that. And also, this was my example too, is kind of the technology, and I said magic. I could probably find a better word for that. Maybe like humanity are blurred via the creation of life and androids in Blade Runner and the psychic abilities of characters and society as a whole in Looper. The whole movie's not based around it, but it just, as a result of humans evolving, humans take on this ability to have psychic abilities. So it's kind of this line being blurred between humanity and this so-called scientific magic, realm. So that was mine, was Looper. What do you got for number 2?
Okay, well, my second choice is the Matrix movies, actually.
Yeah.
Not only the first one. The first one does take a lot of its themes of what is real, what isn't, from that same sort of hyper-reality of that Blade Runner explores as well. But even closer to the end of the trilogy, a little bit of spoilers if you actually want to watch it, but the end of The Matrix really starts to question whether it really should be an us versus them kind of robot-human distinction, and is there really a difference between these robot programs and us humans? And it might not have done it the best, but it definitely picked that idea straight out of Blade Runner's mouth.
Yeah, I mean, I'd completely agree. And again, the cyberpunk esque idea. I feel like they even took it a step further with using that lighting to make it. I'll keep it not so film so you guys can still enjoy it, but like to make it look kind of green and pale and sickly and that cyberpunk idea of not this unrest society. So it's definitely. The Matrix has a same sort of cyberpunk aesthetic at times, but there is a big difference in that the Blade Runner movie is a very grounded sci-fi movie compared to movies like The Matrix, which are much more over-the-top, extreme. They don't really feel as real as other movie kind of things, but Blade Runner feels eerily real. Sure. I mean, it's a plausible,
it's a plausible future.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right. Eric, is it your turn?
Yeah. So my number 2 is actually a book. It's called Neuromancer by William Gibson, written in 1984. And this book actually coined the term cyberpunk and the term the Matrix.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So basically, it's about this.
I think you win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a. Oh wait. what am I saying? All right, it's about this guy named Case, and he's basically this like hacker, this underground hacker that works for like certain like mafia groups and like underground organizations, and he goes into this like cyber reality called the Matrix with his mind. He jacks in, and so he does that. He's kind of like, he just gets information. He, you know, incepts things, and he steals information. Yeah. And so basically, he one of the organizations he's working for, he turns on for money, and he's punished severely and is given a drug that fries his neurons, so he may never dive in again. And that's basically the beginning of the book, and it is awesome.
So you said he works for a corporation?
No, he works for underground organizations.
Oh, organization.
Like gangs, basically.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sounds cool.
Again, the dark underbelly of society.
Yeah, and it takes place in a very similar like society to Blade Runner. It's very like the book starts out in Japan, so it's like this huge like cyberpunk metropolis. It's gritty. It's also still multicultural, even though it takes place in Japan, and it's very much reminiscent of Blade Runner.
I think one of the things that Blade Runner influenced with a lot of sci-fi movies later on is that it really introduced crime to sci-fi, because crime before at least Blade Runner and a lot of movies that followed it was really a film noir thing. Like, you didn't really see the prevalence and overwhelming sense of there being criminals in a lot of movies before Blade Runner. And Blade Runner really took that from film noir and placed it in a different movie, showing that film noir wasn't the only one that could benefit off of this. And now we see it in movies all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I mean, the crime that was being committed, if you want to look at it in a realistic way, in Star Wars was by Luke, you know, by Obi-Wan, you know, or Ben Kenobi, sorry.
Side note on Neuromancer, by the way.
Yes.
One of the coolest female characters I've ever seen in anything. Just go read it. Just go read it.
Okay.
And what's the title one more time and the author?
Neuromancer by William Gibson, 1984.
Awesome.
Woo.
Okay. Moving it kind of quickly since we're running out of time. Number 2, I picked kind of mainstream, but I picked Inception by Christopher Nolan, you know, as influenced by Blade Runner. I picked it because, in my mind, it is a use of a mainstream film to reinforce philosophical ideas in a sci-fi setting. You don't see that very often. You see it in, you know, lower sci-fi. You know, nowadays we have more common sci-fi films, but really this is a film that has action in it, but is, I would say, arguably is not an action film. I would say, it's based around the philosophy of, you know, and I even put as well as far as identity is very important in these films, you know, where they're, you know, these replicants, these androids in Blade Runner are fighting to meet their creator, are fighting to have an identity. And Cobb in Inception, through these dreams and these trips, is starting to lose his identity. And his identity is based around his past with his wife and his kids rather than who he is at the moment and providing for his team. So I think it's, again, the idea of identity and what it means to have an identity is reinforced in that movie.
It definitely. I didn't even think about Inception. That's a great pick. Great pick.
Thank you. All right, Josh, what do you got for us?
Well, one that I'm pretty sure Eric definitely did think of, because I'm looking over at his extras list that he was thinking of talking about, Ghost in the Shell, which not only borrowed thematically from Blade Runner, well, maybe not from Blade Runner, but from the same thematic sources as Blade Runner did, but definitely the animated movie relied heavily on Blade Runner's aesthetic of these huge cities that you see from a humanistic point of view. We talked about Ghost in the Shell a couple weeks ago, and one of the things that I don't think I got to praise the original on enough was that all of the shots of the city that we see are from the point of view of a human in the city. They're not these sweeping camera crane shots that are flying above the walkways and the city streets. All the shots in the original animated of the city are from eye level of where people might be, from the windows of buildings where people are. And it really made the city feel lived in and livable. And that's something that I think it took heavily from Blade Runner, where we see most of the city through the eyes of Deckard in his car, looking around at the city around him.
Which I will say, I think they carried on in the new one, because there are shots of Ryan Gosling, you know, in his car, and I can't wait. It looks so much in the vein.
I cannot wait to watch people sit in a car
Roger Deakins filmed it. I'm fine with it.
As long as there are neon lights in the car, I'm good.
Of course.
All right, Eric, what do you got for number 3, man?
So my number 1 pick is actually another book. Sorry, but it's Ready Player One. Have you guys heard of Ready Player One?
I've heard of the Steven Spielberg movie that's coming out.
Yes, upcoming movie. I've heard people cannot wait for it. I've never read the book.
Yeah,
Same.
the book is amazing. Okay, so it was written in 2011 by Ernest Cline, and basically virtual worlds are now more real than the dystopian reality that plagues the earth. Commerce, culture, and lifestyle all take place outside of reality in this program called the Oasis, which is basically a virtual reality video game. And escapism and the distortion of one's own identity play a heavy role. So basically this kid... so in this world, like the world, so the book takes place in OKC, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it starts out in OKC.
What a dump.
Yeah, and it's so overpopulated that they have stacks of RVs on top of each other, just towers of RVs, and the world is just crap. And everybody's just trying to escape in the Oasis, and it meant like people don't really identify with their real bodies anymore. They identify with their character in the game. And it's just really interesting. If you get around to reading it, it's amazing.
That's exactly that idea of hyper-reality
Yeah.
Josh was talking about.
Well, okay. One of the things that a lot of movies who do study hyper-reality in them is that kind of they get wrong from the person who came up with the idea of hyper-reality originally, is that the idea of hyperreality relies on the reality being invisible and not seeable by the characters in it. That's one of the things that is criticized of the original Matrix movie, actually, is that the idea of the hyperreality being more real than the reality only works when you only see the hyperreality. And so it has become the representation of reality in your life. Not saying that it wasn't based off that idea, just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, it takes it and kind of warps it in a way. I can't wait. Like Josh said, it's a movie directed by Steven Spielberg. It has, I forget his name. His first name's Ty. But it also has Mark Rylance in it, who's in Dunkirk, and he also won an Oscar for Bridge of Spies. So, yeah, I mean, I can't wait. I'm really excited.
And it's a really big, this is cliche, but it's a love letter to 80s culture the whole time. Because the guy who created the Oasis grew up in the 80s. I don't know if
that's popular right now.
No, not at all, right?
All right, before we get to our last segment, I'm going to have my number 3 or number 1, as you want to look at it. But the film Ex Machina. Did either of you ever see this movie?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
but
it's
I've
amazing.
Heard it's amazing.
Alex Garland wrote and directed this film. He got famous for writing for Danny Boyle. He wrote the original script for 28 Days Later, kind of the resurgence of the zombie films into modern society. But he also wrote The Beach, and he's worked a lot with Danny Boyle. Alex Garland is awesome, and I believe it was his directorial debut. I could be wrong, but it is a beautiful movie. It has 3 main characters in it. I think a cast of maybe 5. It's super limited. Domhnall Gleeson, Alicia Vikander, and Oscar Isaac, who I love Oscar Isaac. It's a movie, for those unaware, I'll just do the synopsis real quick because it's a lesser known. A young programmer is selected to participate in a groundbreaking experiment in synthetic intelligence by evaluating the qualities of a breathtaking humanoid AI. So there's a female, Oscar Isaac has created, he's like this billionaire, like head of quote unquote, Facebook. It's not Facebook, but he's a CEO type that has more money than he can count. He's reclusive, and he has created this female AI, who he wants, one of his employees wins a lottery and gets to come to where he lives and perform tests on this AI to see whether she actually is human or not. The movie could be seen as slow for some people because there's not a lot of action. There's only 3 main characters. The dialogue is amazing. The shots are beautiful, and it is really an in-depth look into what is life, what is humans, the importance of choice, and kind of go along with Blade Runner as well. Not only the replicant idea, but the importance of choice with Ava, who's Alicia Vikander's character, the AI, and then also Rachel, who's Sean Young's character in Blade Runner. So it's a movie about choice, the implications of creating life with Tyrell from Blade Runner and Nathan from Ex Machina. I cannot recommend this movie enough, and also an idea that kind of explores nature versus technology.
Can I talk about like the overarching theme of identity real quick before we move on?
Yeah, we have a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can.
I just wanted to say that I think this idea of identity and like what makes people like who they are is really important right now, especially like with Blade Runner 2049 coming out, because I mean, we see like, race politics and, sexuality politics coming up all the time nowadays. And I think it's really important for people to think about what makes you who you are as a person. And I think like cyberpunk like this, it really ties into that well.
Yeah, I think that I don't know how much the audience or you guys know about the postmodernism in film, but Blade Runner definitely has elements of the postmodern in it, studying duality of human existence, about what we're expected to be versus what we are, and stuff like that.
I just want to throw that in real quick. So
sure, yeah, no, by all means, welcome.
Quick ending.
So since we're running out of time, our show was about Blade Runner. It was about choices, about humanity, about the future, about the past. I frankly was so excited for this show. So Blade Runner 2049 is in theaters. I think we're all going to go see it as fast as we can. Very quickly, what can you not put down this week? Our recurring segment of things that we love that are going on in our life, whether it's an old movie, whether it's a new book. Josh, what's something you got going on that you just can't stop thinking about?
Well, I listen to a lot of music, and that's really all I've had time to listen to new this week. I've been listening to this, I believe, Swedish band, but they sing in English, Kings of Convenience. They're a little bit older. They make very soft, sweet, folksy melodies, and they have about 2 vocalists singing at all times. I've been listening to their first album a lot this week, Quiet is the New Loud. It's really good. It's just one of the most relaxing, happy music bands I've found, and I enjoy them quite a bit.
Very neat. All right, Eric, what do you got going on? What can you not put down?
Well, I got my hands on a Super Nintendo Classic, and man, I love it. I am just enjoying it all day.
Your poor midterms.
Sure. Yeah. Well, he's graduated, man. He's got nothing to worry about.
So got lucky. Been playing Donkey Kong, all those classic '90s Nintendo games. It's great.
So for my thing I can't put down, very briefly, it's a YouTube series called Cinefix. Is the channel.
Oh, yes.
It's been around for a while, but it's amazing.
They're really good.
It's not always top 10, but it's a countdown channel that explores, the best actor portrayals, the best shots in film, the most intense shots in film. It just explores, it picks a theme and it dives into it, and I feel like they know what they're talking about, and I can just binge it.
I don't know if you've seen on their channel, one of my favorite video series they have on their channel is What's the Difference, where they look at a movie and then the source material the movie was based on and go through the story and thematic differences.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, so Cinefix, check it out if you guys like film. It's a film lover's paradise. All right, well, that about wraps us up for this week. Like I said, we took a week off. We appreciate your patience. I believe some streaming issues again today, so hopefully we're going to try to get this copy to us and get it recorded and get it put up for you guys. But thank you so much for joining us this week. We are Pop Culture Water Cooler. You can find us both on Facebook and Twitter at PopCultureWC. Also, we are here every Friday from 6 to 7 p.m. at KXOU. You can listen at kxou.ou.edu and tune in app when it's wanting to work. Eric and Josh, it's always a pleasure. Any last words?
Well, thank you, and I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
All right, you guys have a good week, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
See ya.